James said he'll be here soon. Just text him.
Awesome.
Thank goodness.
All right, and we are live. Thank you guys for joining us again for another session of the DCC Presents the Quarter of Prep. Today, I have the pleasure of moderating for Lynn Tran and Alex Thompson, and we will be joined by Professor James Choi later on. And today's discussion is prepping as a director here at DePaul University. So I'm just going to hand it off to you guys, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the live chat, and I will make sure that our presenters are able to answer them. So thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you, Sam. Should we just maybe introduce ourselves a little bit? Because I'm not sure if everybody knows who we are. Maybe they know you more, Alex. So I'm just gonna. Oh, you're muted.
Oh my gosh! I was just saying. I think they know you more probably.
So I'm gonna go first. My name is Ling Tran. I am in my very last quarter here at DePaul, trying to get an MFA degree in film and TV. My concentration is directing, and I have not made films for a long time yet, and I'm still learning. And I've done a little
What's up,
bit.
Guys? Sorry about that. My internet's been very spotty lately.
So good to see you.
Too much usage, I think.
We're literally we just came into the room. So right now we're just doing a round of introduction.
Okay.
So yeah, so I just went. So basically I've done a few short films, and right now I am prepping for the DePaul's Indie Studio Feature 2020. Alex, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Alex Thompson. I'm an adjunct at DePaul, and right now I'm kind of in the midst of development myself on some projects, all of which are with James. So it's good to be here with James. Feel very supported. Supportive, I mean, not supportive. Yeah.
James, do you want to just introduce yourself a little bit? I mean, I'm sure everybody knows who you are, but just to be safe.
Sure. I teach full time at DePaul, as you guys may know, or if you don't, then I'm sure we'll run into each other. Yeah, I'm just working on a bunch of stuff. I have a short doc right now that I shot in Brazil that's playing around. It's playing at LA Shorts Fest right now. And then just like Alex, just have a bunch of projects in development. I mean, we've sort of been on hold the last couple of months, this pretty much this year. So just waiting for things to open up and then starting to get rolling. And then I'm working with Ling, as she mentioned, on the Indie Studio. That was an initiative that I started 3 years ago. So this will be our third student feature.
Wow.
And probably, it's in really great hands. Very excited to see what Ling does, and hopefully the conditions open up for us to do this in the winter.
Awesome. Thank you guys for the introduction.
3 years ago.
So, well, just so when I started making films, I kind of feel like you get taught different skills or technical skills, to direct, but nobody really teach you how to be a director fully or completely. And I know we all are very different individuals, and the three of us, we probably have very different process of prepping. So I just want to ask you guys some questions for the broad strokes of what your prep as a director look like typically.
Sounds good. Yeah. I'm interested to hear, James, for you, like what you're like I don't know, because I feel like directors don't often get to talk to one another, and
Yeah.
when you're in it, you're just in it. You're sort of
Yeah.
all hands on deck, and
As a
so
director,
it'll be fun to like
typically.
I don't know, just hear Lynn your process as well. I think just yeah, so I'm down.
So you want to know what the process is like before we shoot?
Mm,
I'm sorry. What? Yeah.
I think let's maybe share a little bit. Like, why don't you share with us, like, like it's like, well, in theories, these are the things that we are taught to do. Like, we collaborate and we like pre-visualize and things. But like, personally, what do you do, and what do you like to do? Like, we just want to get like some insights in like, your real and very specific like process of prepping.
Yeah. For me, you guys, I mean, this is again in the context of small indie films. So, the idea of pre-visiting exactly what I think I want is, has to be flexible. Like it's like once you start getting into location scouting and looking for locations, once you start getting sort of the details of those things, you start to realize what this is going to become. So, I just try to get to the core things of like, what can I control, right? What can I control in this process? And so,
Oh no.
It appears we're having a little bit of technical difficulties. Let's give it a sec, see if James Choi comes back. Alex, I don't know if you have any responses to what Lynn just asked in the meantime while James reconnects.
Yeah, sure. I think sort of piggybacking off what James was saying, what you can control sometimes comes down to, finding different ways to put the script up on its feet. So when you're in prep, I'm assuming you have a script that you're excited about. And excited could literally just mean that you've shown it to your cinematographer and they feel. I think that's an important, like, very first step for me is I send it to like a few people, like maybe 2 or 3 people, producers, maybe an actor, maybe a DP. For me, I have like a life partner DP, and if they vibe to it and they start talking about it, then it sort of it motivates me. And so putting it up on its feet in some way. I love to have a reading. I love to have I love to start talking scene by scene, really getting into the nitty gritty of it. Even just sort of visualizing it out loud. I'm not actually a big pre-visualization person. I don't do storyboards very often. I think that's kind of a luxury. Um, but I do start to talk to the department heads, and I start to talk to specifically my DP about what does this movie look like? What is our vocabulary going to be? What lenses could we imagine shooting this on? What are we going to be moving a lot? Are we going to be stationary? There's James.
Sorry, guys.
No.
Go ahead, Alex. Finish your thought.
No. I was just saying. I think like one of the first things I do is I send if the script is in a place I feel okay about. It's like more about getting it up on its feet in some way, whether that's sending it to producer collaborators like you or Nate, and then just starting to get feedback, starting to like throw an idea up against the wall and see what sticks. That's kind of even more important to me than the nitty gritty pre-production checklist at first, because you gotta know what you're making before you can kind of start making. Because then you know what's important and what you can kind of. With independent film, you always have to cut corners. So knowing which corners you can cut and which ones you don't want to cut, I think is important.
So actually, I have a question to go, off that. So yeah, I think I like the just getting the script on feet. I wonder if you've ever had so like most of us like students, we tend to write our own script and then make them. But sometimes so DePaul just have just opened up DePaul as well, and now we have kind of access to like other people's scripts as well. So uh, how different would it be if you were to pick up a script that is not your work, that's someone else's work, like what is the process like from you get the script to the step that you just talked about.
Well, I think for me, I directed two long form projects that weren't based on my work. And for me, it's like if you can establish what the seed is that's there that you really love, and then because collaborating is hard, and James, you kind of speak to this. I mean, you were in the room for St. Francis for those readings. It's like
Yeah.
you're sort of chasing like a starting line. It's like you're chasing, and you want to make sure everybody's like running towards the same point. But I think I was talking about this actually in therapy today, weirdly, and it's like when you realize that everything is generative, like all conflict is actually just generative, it ceases being about ego, and you kind of like open up more. So it's like don't like something that I see all the time is like students who don't know how to tell a writer that something isn't working, or they think that they have to have the solution if something isn't working. And it's like there's nothing embarrassing about things not working. Nothing works at first, and it's just about like get it up on its feet. Have a reading, let the writer hear it out loud, let the actors hear it out loud, let them ask questions, let your producers ask questions, let your DP say like, I don't know about this scene, like um or I love this moment. I think it's actually kind of the same. um but it's about you getting excited as a director about sort of the dream, the thing that's out there that doesn't exist yet. Is that total bullshit, James?
No, I think that's true. I think the interesting thing is the experience with St. Francis so integrally tied to the writer and the lead, your relationship. That's a very, very specifically unique situation. And so, it'd be interesting to hear specifically, aside from letting that go, because I think the collaborative effort, of course, the first step in all of this is just being open-minded and understanding and knowing that you don't know everything, and leaning on people that might have that answer, and not feeling, the ego or shame or any of that stuff get in the way that you're less, because collectively it's always going to be stronger. Um, you know, I directed a script that somebody gave me long form that I didn't write. And I think for me, in the initial stages of that process, you have to just build a trust and an understanding that goes both ways for the writer and you, because once you get the script as a director, it's not like I'm trying, like, again, St. Francis is a little bit different, but I'm not turning to the writers every time I make a decision about what we're going to do, in regards to my conversation with my DP or just what's in my head with the story. And so just building that trust and foundation both ways, that they know that they're giving this to you, and your vision might not be exactly the same, and you might have things that you have questions about that you might go back to the writer with, but that understanding and trust has to be is essential, because I can't direct something worried about every move or step I make that I didn't write, because I didn't write it, feeling like I have to go back to the writer, because not to distinguish, but typically writers are not directors for a reason. And they are two different crafts, directing and writing. And some people can do both really well. But so you can't lean on that and feel like, oh my God, it's not mine, so I have to go to them for every, detail and every nuanced thing that I'm going to decide may change as a director. Again, I think that's really important, and that typically happens in Hollywood. The writers get totally neglected sometimes and totally abused in that sense. And then in St. Francis situation, that line is a lot, you have to be a little more sensitive to that because of just how everything is tied together in that situation, which I'm sure, you walked brilliantly through, Alex, in that situation. But it's definitely unique, I think, because I don't think a lot of directors, if they're not writer directors and get scripts, go through that sort of situation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Today we were on a rehearsal. Kelly and I, who wrote St. Francis, were on a rehearsal for a scene of Mouse that they're doing. They're putting up at IFP. They cast it. And, they read through it once and we gave feedback. But it was really cool to see her co-directing that film, and it was really cool to see her with the director hat on, because it was not about the words. It wasn't like it wasn't like you they are really different skill sets, and it's almost like, I think, being a director almost necessarily, you're always sort of reaching for that big picture, and you are reaching past the words. Like any movie scene that you love is not a scene that you love because of the words on the page. It's because never. It's because of performance. It's because of the way that it's shot. It's because of the story and the context surrounding it. But I think that's a big thing that I wish upon screenwriters is let go of that preciousness. Know that this is integral to the process, and that it's it's like a hunk of amazing aged Parmesan. It's got to get graded. It's got to go through something to get to the right spot. Anyway, more cooking metaphors later, I guess. But I don't know. It's like oil and water, right? Or anytime you're what's the word when you're making a sauce, there has to be some friction and change in order for things to emulsify.
Do you think, Alex, that there is a moment of handing the baton off, or where does that moment exist with that script? Which obviously, if the director didn't write it, it's not theirs. I mean, technically, in the sense where the writer fully sort of hands it, where you feel fully like, okay, I got it. Now it's my leg to run, and you fully sort of go full speed. Where does that transition happen, do you think?
I think you've got to just have because I had a situation like this in my directing class where there weren't clear conversations between a writer and a director. Right. I think it's just that first conversation. It's my work, I know your work, I respect these words. Do I have permission to take this and run with it? How much do you want to be involved? And then then you really can't say at that point, if they say, no, I want to be more involved in that, and you say, well, I don't want you that involved, then it's not your script. So you don't get to do that movie.
Right.
But if they say, okay, yeah, I trust you. So being a director, it's like you're convincing everybody that you're worth spending time on. So I think that begins with the writer,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but
for sure.
Totally, ideally, you're on set and you are sort of like Nate and I have a really simpatico sort of mind meld, and so I will be referring to him constantly, talking to him constantly. But for the most part, you're out there on your own, kind of forging ahead with a team who are all kind of on a track that you've set for them.
Yeah.
Or a direction that you've set.
Right. And definitely when you're there in that moment, I mean, as far as a writer, unless they're on set, is very far at that point, is pretty far removed, at least in what's happening directly in the making of the film.
Yeah.
Because you're shooting, you're talking to your DP. There are things that are happening there that are that. completely could, alter from whatever that initial written script was, but they're not there typically, right?
Yeah, yeah. Kelly brings this up in like a negative way, but I didn't look at the script. In most days, I would say 90% of our shooting days, I would use my sides as a shot list, and then I would just listen. And if it felt right, I would give notes based on the performance, not based on what was on the page. And because we didn't have a script supervisor, I missed a bunch of stuff. And Kelly would have to come in and be like, "We're totally missing this line about the parents," and I'd be like, "Oh, right, we got to get that line." But
right.
But you don't have to. I think it sort of gets hand off to the performers in a way.
Yeah.
And the production designer and the DP and all the people who have had to study it and break it down and yeah.
Yeah.
On that note, though, I do want to. I think there's an interesting point there in regards to Prepo that Alex just mentioned. He said that the sides are his shot list. I always find that part of directors really interesting, in the way that people prep and in the way that they prep and previs and do shot lists. So I'd love to hear more on what that means for you when you say your shot list is your sides. On a side note, I was Ling's advisor for her MFA, and I don't know if this is intentional, but talk about somebody who is specific and just really about wanting control and knowing that. Ling's thesis was shot in Vietnam. She made a American version of the Vietnamese film that she was going to ultimately shoot in Vietnam. So she made the film twice. And then when she went to Vietnam, she sent me a visual shot list, like basically like recreating the movie without, with stand-ins and stuff to like know what the frame and the shot is going to look. I mean, that is like, when I was like looking at it, I'm like, you want to talk about somebody who is thorough and like wanting to totally see the steps. Yeah. And then I hear you say your shot list is your sides. I mean, they're very completely opposite, and I'm curious to know what that process is like, because obviously that's a big part of when you're starting to think about making a film as a director. I mean, everybody talks about shot list. What is your shot list? If you don't have a shot list, it's all going to go to hell. Nobody knows what the hell is going on.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think, that sounds amazing, by the way. What's funny is today I saw a previs for a music video that Nate Hertzellers, my DP, and his operator Jarrett are directing together just randomly because COVID is crazy and there's no money for producers. But it was so meticulously crafted, this previs. It was like every shot, every pan, every whip pan, every push. It was awesome. And what I thought was, there's a movie where I really need that, and it's for St. Francis. And I think for a lot of the stuff that I think of, I think film is like a language ultimately. It's like different shots mean different things, different lenses communicate different things. It's in some ways like a more expansive language and a more easily understood language than English even, or just any spoken language, any prose. And so if you can establish a vocabulary, a limited vocabulary, then, which is what we did. So on St. Francis, to put it into the I guess the present tense, I established past tense on St. Francis a visual language where the 40 millimeter handheld was the baseline. That was normal. And then any emotional intention that went beyond that was a 65, still handheld. And so we picked every moment of stillness in the film, and we picked every shot that was on the 24 to 290, the ingenue, the big 27-pound zoom lens we used. And so once that was established, it was just coming to set and saying, all right, well, this is our language. What's the scene? And so if you really know the story, I think there is an argument to be made that you could if you're not working with a lot of lights, if you're not working with a lot of choreography, you could work on the fly like we did. We just didn't have time. We tried shot listing. The first 5 minutes of the film were shot listed. It's hilarious too because we didn't shoot half the shots. We just didn't have time. But then we just lost. We lost our. We just ran out of time because we were producing too. Like Nate was like basically producing all the rental stuff and all the vendors and But yeah, Darius Kanji said something that I'll always remember. I think Nate told me, and if you can ever get your hands on these like art books that are like cinematographer interviews that are way too technical for most people, they are just the best because there are all these little nuggets. But Darius Kanji said like make 2 choices and then stick to those choices. And I love that. So for us, it was like 40 mil, and then the 27 to 290. That was it. Those were our choices.
Yeah. I'm not I work with a lot of people who work that way exactly, Alex. So, coming into film school when the importance of shot listing, just the concept of that is so important, and while there is importance in that, I honestly, from a practical level, haven't experienced too many people. I mean, obviously, like music videos, like are so specific and so short that you are that specific. But in long form, especially working on indies, I haven't experienced too much of that. Like Ling, I spoke for Ling there because I don't know if that was intentional or not to like make her version of the movie in English, and then to reshoot. Like, I mean, what a luxury to have, right? I mean, wouldn't that be amazing, Alex, to like reshoot your movie 3 times?
Yeah.
Or just be like, well,
really good.
Like, yeah, I mean, and her thesis is great. So I don't know if that was your intention, Ling, or do you want to talk about why you chose to do that, or what that was for you?
So the funny thing was, it was not at first. It was not intentional. It wasn't like, okay, I'm gonna do this film like in America and then I'd redo it. It was because the project that I had that was intended to be my second year project kind of like fell through because my producer like had dropped out last minute. Not dropped out. We resumed it later, but then at the time it was impossible for us to make that film. So I was like, okay, so now I need a project to make to make it the second year project. And I was actually talking to Ali, and Ali was like, why don't you just make this here,
like do your basis?
Yeah. So I just went back. I cut a few scenes, so it was like a smaller version, more compact version. And the thing about my thesis in Vietnam is it is not like necessarily the same kind of things that we did for the second year project, the American version, but what I kept was the grammar of scenes. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, to me, what is important, like even right now on this project that I'm working on, that we I don't have locations yet, but like already think about like this scene, for example, what kind of shots we need. So we need 2 shots. One is this and one is that, and they're not like specific. This is where we put the camera because we don't have locations yet. But to me, it's more like, okay, what is this? Like, let's say long shot signifies, and like you said, Alex, it's a language, and just trying to like establish the meaning of shots, and then what are we telling the audience with the scene, and then so for my thesis that stays in both versions, but apparently with the difference in locations, actors, also like the actions in the movie are a bit different. And to be honest, my protagonists are different like people in those films, like the personality, they're different, but like the grammar of scenes, like the structure of the scenes are the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that also has to do with like this, like my voice and like my style. Like I like throughout, well, in the past few years, I feel like I'm drawn to this kind of energy of storytelling. So then I feel like I had created like a thing for myself that like I feel like every movie that I direct will have this kind of like, this is like the essence of like the grammar of scenes. So
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's
Cool.
so cool. It reminds me of like, I remember when I was working on my thesis at DePaul, and it was a feature, and so we didn't have a lot of time. And so for every scene, the question we asked, this is Nate and I again, the question we asked was like, what shot needs to be meaningful? And so if it was a close up, then the whole rest of the scene would be a wide shot. And so then that close up would just hit. And it was like an exercise in like one thing every time. Every scene was just one thing. It was like stillness. Okay, well, we're going to move in every other moment. You know, I think that's so cool that you're already developing that style. Because I think style is a form of like just developing your language, like what how you want to speak in the medium. That's awesome. I'd love to see both of the films, or yeah, once they're both completed.
thank you. So I know we probably like have an hour, and we have. I feel like there's so much that like you guys can share that will benefit like everyone. So I just wanna maybe move to the next questions that I kind of have, and I wanna ask you guys, which is, you know, there are a lot of things, like on, well, I don't want to say tasks, but you know, in prep you kind of have to do so many things. Like, how do you prioritize your tasks or like your prep, you know, like things that you have to do? Or like, what are your priorities? What is the most important thing for you?
I get really worried about situations, so I tend to do the work early of the three things I feel like I, as a director, take on that I wouldn't typically have to is either myself or with another person. Like James did a schedule breakdown for this new film we're doing, and that so like getting a one-liner is really important to me, and because it's something I can do by myself or with one other person, and it lets me see in my head like, oh, we can make this, or we can make this in this number of days, or similarly like a locations list. I do like a list of locations because it's like, where am I going to shoot a hospital scene if I don't have a hospital? You know, it makes you feel like you're a little bit more in control, and then you can pass that off to someone else and say, all right, go find a hospital, or you know, here's the list. And obviously that's something somebody else can do as well. And then cast list is the third. I think those are like my priorities, more than budget. Even I feel like budget, that you can make it work, but the other stuff, you need to know. You need to know all that before you know your budget, almost.
Yeah, I'm just along that line. And again, I always go back to just, you got to figure out what you can control. And again, it's obviously the script and making sure that that's in a place. And then other than that, it really comes down to, you know, in regards to what's going to make a presentable film, is going to be your talent and the performances and the location. And like Alex said, like, it's weird to think like, I'm going to think about locations before I know what my budget is. But like, surprisingly, you do have a lot of control in locations that directly connect to your budget.
Yeah.
If you know, like, it's not like you have, like, budgets are like, oh, to get this, you have to spend X amount of dollars. So that's something you can control. It's just a matter of like how much time you want to spend looking for these things, or clearly sort of defining, at least, you know, feel wise, even what that location feels like for your camera and for your vision, and how you want to sort of block and how you want to move things, or like how you want your characters to move in that space. So if you sort of know it, and so again, and I think, you know, we come from a very sort of independent world. So, you know, in like a studio world, you know, you're sort of doing all of those things, or, you know, you're prepping a lot of those things with different people are prepping those things and you're thinking about it. But from an indie standpoint, if you're prioritizing, I think, you know, as Alex mentioned, I mean, you know, your casting is so important. I mean, it's just mind blowing to me how quickly people cast.
Yeah.
How, like, I almost feel like that's an afterthought. They do all that other stuff first, and then they're like, pull the casting, and then they're like, well, these are the 10 options. Like, let's just go with one of them. And it's like, dude, that's got to be like huge. And then the locations, like, and part of those things as a director, at least on the low budget, you can do at least the initial sort of steps.
Yeah.
And then, of course, as you bring your team in and people understand what you're looking for, you know, you're taking all that sort of suggestions and feedbacks from people. But those two on the priority list are both controllable. And, I mean, even talent, surprisingly, you guys, is not directly related to cost. Like, you know, it's not like everybody is expensive.
No.
Or every talented person is expensive. So you just got to, like, do a little digging, do a little homework, do a little more outreach, you know, rely on your resources and network, circle of networks, and like really do that. And you can't just hand those two important things off to people, especially in the beginning. Like, you can't just be like, that's not my job. That's like the casting director's job. That's the location scout's job. Like, I'm letting them handle that. Like, that, at least on the low part, those are the two things that you can control to have a positive, like a presentable outcome for your film. Like, you know, if you have those two things, like, you're going to be able to deliver something.
Yeah.
And so you gotta, those are essential.
I think that's such a valuable thing, James, like you pointing out that there are these things that we think cost money, like have to cost money. Like St. Francis, we spent money on one location, and they were like 25. We just decided like $0. We're not paying for anything, and we just took a really long time. It was like months of looking for those places. But casting director is another one. Like, I feel like there are these jobs, casting director, locations manager, where you think it's this mystical thing, but at the end of the day, it's literally someone who is calling people and looking at lists and looking at pictures all day. And the worst thing that can happen is that you pay someone and trust someone who's going to say, all right, yeah, I'm your location manager. I found these two houses and they're both $3,000 a day. So these are your options. And you're like, surely, like, you know, like go on Facebook, like, you know, hey, looking for a house. It's literally like, it doesn't matter how professional you are. At the end of the day, it's like, what's going to show up on film? You know, you don't need these people if they don't add value to your team. Yeah.
And those two things do take time, but I think they're super. I mean, outside of once you have your story in place, it's like you have to spend a lot of energy on those two things. Like, you have to. I mean, as soon as I knew Kelly was involved as the lead actress, that was like, I just had the utmost confidence, like, okay, the lead's going to be great. And then, you know, I would soon find out, like, she has amazing friends who are also amazing actors. And so that process was really like, I mean, we didn't really do a formal casting call for all those roles, but they were all so, like, whether it was a one-liner or whether it was two-liners, it's amazing I mean, again, we were obviously really fortunate to have somebody in that world, in the Chicago world of theatrical acting and that network. But that's part of the work. That's like the part of the work that you have to do if you don't have the luxury of being in that world. And it was huge. That was so big. That was so big to have even the minute roles be that powerful and strong.
Yeah. Even in COVID times, I mean, imagine you don't have access to a casting director, you don't have access to actors, but find a 3/4 page scene, send it out to everybody that you know who has the look that you want, and then remember that you have months to work with them. Like, you can be a director for 2 months working with this person to craft a role. Like, I don't know. Like, you really, it's more about like get as much data as you can, get options, get feedback, get people on camera.
I mean, a funny little story, you guys, just to even further put a stamp on that example, is Bridget's boyfriend in St. Francis was like some dude that was waiting like tables for like Alex would go to Reno a lot, and that's how he knew him.
Yeah,
and
for years
like,
I known him. Yeah.
And you just was like, and Alex was like, I feel like I know this guy. Like it wasn't like, oh, because it's another important role, and we're like, typically you're thinking, oh, we got to do like a casting, like we got to find actors, find good actors out there, and it was like. Yeah, and it was like it sort of like if you're aware of that and looking, because it's like I think people like Alex are constantly developing films, whether they're shooting or not. Like there could be a waiter, and if he's an actor, Alex's mind is already thinking pre-pro development for something, and it's you're not just waiting until that moment when you have a month to be like, okay, now I need to find somebody in cast. It's just a constant process.
Yeah. I sent the script to Rounding, this horror film James and I are going to make soon. I have to give you an update tomorrow. To like 15 actors with no cast list, no like, hey, I want you for this role and you for this role. Just like, hey, are you guys available in the next 5 months? What would you think of shooting in a bubble? Give this a read and give me feedback. And all it was like very preemptive, obviously, but I'm so happy I did that because it got everybody thinking. I got some valuable feedback, and it's fun. It's fun to be thinking in that way, and people like to be involved. I think. I don't think it hurts to ask.
Yeah, that was some really, really valuable like advice. And I like personally, I do think I need to get better at casting in locations as well. But just to be a little bit more specific, like what advice do you guys have in terms of like when you hold a casting call, for example, or like when you contact someone and you want to read them, like how do you kind of like what do you do to make sure that that is the person that you want?
I mean, I tend to, for casting, I tend to really value, because when you've been directing and you've been on set, you realize that it really is about getting to a certain place. It's not about arriving in that place. You don't show up to set and have what is needed. You do a take, you do 2 takes. It's a relationship ultimately. So I think when you're holding a casting call, engage with people. Like don't worry about appearing like a director. Don't worry about asking the right questions or giving good direction. Even I did one of the most fun casting calls ever with my friend Brad Smith, who directed a film that is just being completed. And he would tell people to do the take as if they had to go to the bathroom, or they had to keep a fart in or something. And it was like, these weren't like great notes, but they loosened people up. You saw how they responded. you saw the personality, but ultimately, like, always watch the screen. It's nothing else really matters. It's what shows up on screen. And so if an actor is performing like this, you probably want to know what they look like on a tighter eye line. So ask for that. Ask the casting director to zoom in. Tell them to sit and do like a controlled close up. Read with them if you want. If you want to get them to a certain place, there really aren't any rules. It's like I think see every person that comes in as an opportunity to get what you want, because that's like giving them the benefit of the doubt as well. So I don't know, James, is that?
Yeah, I think that sums it up beautifully. I mean, I mean that's the thing. It's like, there's nothing more frustrating than seeing or being a part of a student casting call and seeing them do what they think you're supposed to do, ask them to read or do things that you're supposed to do. And it's like, it has to be a little more instinctive than that. Like, you have to engage. Like, you have to go in there with a clear idea of what you want as a director, or if your casting directors are doing this, to ask for those things that you need, that you're looking for, because and it's not bound to this thing that everybody is supposed to do, or that you're supposed to look for specifically, because every film is different and every character is different. Like, so you have to the engagement is essential. Yeah. And I think Alex's point about what's on camera, like, it mind boggles me when I see casting auditions and it's like I can't see shit, or like the angle is so just one thing, and it's like, how do you get anything out of that? Or like, what are you getting out of that at the end of the day? Like, you're going to be shooting them on this 16:9 frame. Like, use that opportunity when they come in to do that. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's no like, you're not wasting people's time. Like, I feel like people feel guilty to ask too much, or ask things that maybe they're not accustomed to, or feeling like that's not normal. And people just got to let that go.
Yeah. I think looks are really good too. Like, when you get them in a close up, ask for looks. Like, look down, look up. Because, no scene, no context. But you could run the scene without lines. Run the scene beat by beat. Just feel it out. The only other thing I'd say that's really specific for casting is I used to have a side for every single role I was auditioning, and I've just completely given up on that. Like, have two good scenes. Like, they've got to be good scenes. It's like, don't bring in somebody and give them a side where they're supposed to say, do you want fries with that? And then it's like, and cut. Great, thanks for coming in. Give them a scene, because who knows? I have a database. I still have the links from PR casting of every person. Like, I feel like everyone in Chicago auditioned for these 2 films that I produced, that and everybody showed up for them, and they all did these incredible scenes. And so I have all these like tapes of people that are just they're there because they think I have a chance at having this like real role, and so they're giving the performance. And you, as a director, you're not giving notes on, a little faster on want fries with that, You're like actually giving real notes about a real character. And it's just more valuable because you never know who's going to like impress you and excite you and make you want to find a place for them in the ensemble.
Yeah.
And also, it's just such a pain, right? Like, why do you want to do so many PDFs? It's like, Policeman Sides number 3 or something. It's like, oh.
Exactly.
Yeah, I myself really enjoy casting too. I feel like it's just like so important to me. I actually had 2 auditions today, which went so well, made me really, really happy. So casting. So I want to talk I want to have you guys talk a little bit about like collaborating, and you guys mentioned like trust earlier, and it's just such a big part of filmmaking. Like there's gonna be like nothing without trust. So how do you let's say how do you first communicate your vision, or like how you seek out collaborators? How do you collaborate with them in pre-production, and what do you usually share with your collaborators, and what do you like withhold, if that's how you work?
What do you think? James? What?
Are those too many questions?
No, I, I think it's really interesting. I think a lot of times I'm already trying to raise money, and so I've made like a deck that can be helpful um, in communicating like visual references, certain comps. But I think more often than not, it's sending the script and then getting on the phone. Like James and I got on the phone about rounding, and he was like, okay, all right, I think this is cool. What are you going for? What do you want to do? What is the best version of this? And I think it's just having those conversations at the script level, and then just saying like, these are the movies I'm watching, these are the films I'm watching that inspire me. You've seen my other work, this is how it's different, this is how it's the same. Yeah, I guess I don't really withhold anything. I don't like to show it's not that I don't like to, I don't show actors any of that stuff though. The only note I ever give actors, I think, ahead of time is like, this is naturalistic. And people take that in a million ways, but it always ends up good. You never regret saying this should be naturalistic in like your first email. And then you never have to say it again. There's like a baseline. I found that email to Ramona's mother, by the way. It was like really early. I was like, we're looking for naturalism. And
Right.
I was like, oh, I'm really glad I sent that email.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird one, but I think the one thing to take away from that, Ling, is, at least for me, and I agree with Alex, I think transparency is really important. And I think there's two coins to this in regards to being a director and then being a producer. I think from a producer standpoint, it's always about, like, you trust and believe in certain people. And so I know that they're going to deliver. So it's just trying to understand what they're trying to do so that you can 100% back them in exactly what they want to do. And, at first you might not completely understand exactly what they want to do, but and believe that in their talent and their vision. So it's just a matter of understanding so that you guys could all get on the same page and be like, I am 100% behind trying to help you accomplish your vision. From the director's standpoint, like for me, if you have producers you trust, it's about finding passion. Like, I think that goes a long way. I just need them to understand that part, that they can listen to you and formulate a trust in, like, ultimately where you're going to go. So their debate or their sort of process is to try to fully understand what that is so that they can help you, right? And make this thing that's good or great even better. And I think a lot of that comes, and ultimately, like we said, I mean, these nuts and bolts things, it's not necessarily rocket science. You just need somebody who's actually excited and passionate like you are to be a part of that. And I don't think a lack of transparency ever is helpful in doing that. Like, I don't think trying to front or trying to be something or trying to represent something that it's not, any of that stuff. I mean, I think there's definitely value with your actors and certain things down the line, writers down the line, that you don't need to share everything with. But I think in the beginning, especially the formulation of the partnership, you have to be transparent and be open. And then once the commitment is there, then it's, it's just about, once the trust and commitment's there, then it's just about, like, you know, the passion.
Yeah. As I've been advising James, I feel like the most common issue that directors run into at DePaul, and I might be totally wrong, this may be just up there, is DPs who are more connected to crew than directors are, and so directors feel entitled to them and obligated to them, and then those DPs walk all over those directors.
Oh, totally.
And they demand things that a reasonable person doesn't need. And so I would say get your DP and your producer on a call immediately to, like, establish, this is the budget, these are the resources we have. Let's find creative solutions together. Because even with Nate, who's a friend, it always ends up that he sits down with Ian and I. Ian's another producer, and Nate looks at the budget and he's like, I mean, I'm gonna need a lot more for my lighting package. I mean, I'm gonna need a lot more. I mean, we can't get a lens for this, and we're like, you've had the budget for months. Like, what are you talking about? We could have heard. And so I think having those conversations, those hard conversations early, and not being afraid to say to someone, like, if you're not down, this partnership isn't worthwhile, because we can't be rewarding that kind of it comes down to crewing too. Like, the directors should have some oversight into who comes onto your sets. Like, you're ultimately responsible for those folks, and so those department heads, they ultimately need to go through you as well. And I think, like, those conversations are really important, because those people need to be excited by your vision, not by, I love my bro so-and-so, and I'm going to show up whenever he wants me to. And I say he, because most of these negative stories are about male DPs. I'm not, like, embarrassed. But I think that your vision, like, every single crew member is a creative, generative position. And so, like, in some ways, it actually does folks a disservice when department heads say, all right, I'll get my people, you'll meet them on day one. It's like, no, we're going to have a barbecue. Everybody's going to come over, or we're going to get coffee, have a socially distanced hangout, and we're just going to talk about the script that we've all read and we all are excited about and have ideas about. But have those conversations early, because, James, is that okay? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Oh, totally, man. Otherwise, it's disaster. It can be disastrous. You do not want to go to war. I mean, there's enough things that I mean, again, everybody says it. You have to expect problems, or you have to expect the ability to adjust and adapt and come up and problem solve. And if you have people, and if that doesn't happen in the beginning and you're not all on the same page, man, it's bad. I've been on the bad end of those. Like, you could have people, threatening to walk off. You could have so many scenarios where it's like the project loses why you were even trying to make the thing, and it could be disastrous. I mean, it's uncomfortable in the beginning sometimes, especially if you feel, or if you hold somebody at a higher regard and you're just, like, kind of shivering, like, oh my God, I hope they do it. And you want to cater to, like, everything that they say, but you got to take a firm stand, because, even if you don't end up getting that person because they end up walking away for whatever reasons, or the demands are too high, finding the person who actually understands that and is on the same page is going to benefit you so much more in the long run. Trying to squeeze that circle into a triangle is just bad news, man. It's just not going to work. So I think, what Alex said is essential.
Yeah. And any DPs listening too, I'm sure you agree that, like, it's a job when it's not working with somebody who feels confident and, like, they have a vision that they're excited to explore. No one has to have all the answers, but I think it's always going to be more fun and more exciting when you feel like, like, to be honest, like, my relationship with Nate is like a marriage. It really is. It's an equal marriage. He really is a co-director. He's the director of photography, and I'm the director of everything else. But he talks to the production designer more than I do. He talks to the gaffer more than I do. He's talking to the actors. Like, everybody who comes on set has the possibility of being indispensable. And so the more you can get excited as a director about, like, who's your gaffer, like, who's et cetera, I think the better the whole thing will be. Like, yeah. Anyways, sorry.
Yeah, and again, just to the agenda, you guys, like, it's people, like, as much as Nate and Alex have this marriage relationship, the give ultimately, again, I mean, the director needs to be open to ideas, but you can't have different people with different agendas. Like, when the project happens and gets on board, and as a director, like, you have to have people who truly believe and understand. Like, it doesn't mean you can't challenge them, and it doesn't mean that you can't question them, or it doesn't mean that you can't help them to try to get better. But at the end of the day, like, they have to be, like, behind that vision. Once you start having different agendas on board, then you lose it, because it's not. That's a fight where it's not about progress or making something better. It's a fight about ego, and once that happens, it's sink your
You're not
ship.
talking about the film anymore. You're not solving.
Yeah.
You're solving the problems of personality. And notice neither of us have given any advice on how to find the best anything. It really is about, like, finding a person who's passionate and as driven as you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard some like film schools have like classes like director DP collaboration. Yeah, it's like really a thing, and well, we don't have it here, but I don't know. It's kind of like also really hard to like make something like that standard, because like we're all different. But well, that's to say how like important the relationship, like, and every relationship like on the film set is so important. And I think like the sets that I've directed, like, when I know the crew well, it usually goes smoother than not.
Oh yeah, I bet that's true. Yeah.
So I think we're like kind of running out of time. So I just have some very specific to the situation right now kind of questions. So with the COVID going on right now, have you guys seen any changes in your like prepping as director process, or how is that affecting you guys? And do you guys have any advice for the students who are looking to prep for like a film like in the near future?
I mean, speaking only from the NBA's example, I would say budget to bubble, budget to actually isolate everyone within a certain time frame. Especially if you're producing shorts, it's even easier. But it's like mitigate risk as much as possible. We're prepping very broadly, and it's about to get faster, but we've budgeted the film so that every single actor can be paid at least a stipend for every day they're not working, that they're sitting in a hotel room. But people aren't even going to be allowed to go out to Whole Foods to get pro bars. It's like, because as a short, you can't afford to be rescheduling and shutting things down, and it's literally a matter of like life and death for some people. So yeah. What do you think, James?
Yeah, I mean, it's you just have to take all the precautions that you can. I mean, there's no sort of answer for that. Again, short of doing what's the guy in Atlanta, short of what he's doing, or totally isolating a cast in a bubble like the NBA. You just have to just constantly be making sure that people are aware of the importance of safety and responsibility. And a lot of that is self responsibility to some degree if you can afford to obviously put them in a hotel. But even then, like, you still have to trust that they're not going to do anything foolish. But yeah, I mean, it's just a constant reminder to make sure that, and I again, that's just a matter of like doing homework and working with people that you know and can trust and that are responsible. Like, that you're not just going to get some random person in, or work with people who are reckless, and just taking a gamble on that, because like Alex said, it is life or death in that sense. Like, if you have to stop production on something small for a week or two because somebody comes down with that, or a couple people come down with it, I mean, that's not something that you can necessarily recover from.
Yeah, and I would say as a director, you're the one who's setting the precedent. So it's like conversations about respecting people on set and using appropriate language or not using inappropriate language. It's like all those conversations. You're the one who is the loudest voice saying, hey, you're too close, put your mask on, or hey, tell your key grip to put their mask on, or sound person's not wearing a mask, what's going on? You're the one who's saying, yeah, I know it's cold, but we're going to have lunch outside. At the end of the day, don't take all the responsibility, and see it as an opportunity, I think, to set a precedent. Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys for your insights. I think we are like close to, we are like running out of time. So do we have anything that, I don't know, I feel like there's just so many things to cover in terms of like prepping as directors, and it can go so many ways. Do you guys feel like there's something that you really want to share with like directors, like students, before we wrap up?
You want to share things?
I mean, I just touching on that again. There are so much to go over and so many things. I think there's a pre-production class at DePaul. Probably good to take that and spend 10 weeks talking about this. But I think, the one thing to take on, at least again, this is in the framework of independent filmmaking, is just don't pass the buck. I know it's a lot, but you just can't be in a situation to just be like, I'm the director, and limit that responsibility to what you think the director does. I mean, it's hard. All of it's hard, but you got to take that responsibility on. Going as far as to being specific about what even Alex talked about people safety things, but that trails through to all of it, to locations, to crewing, to casting. Like, you can't pass that buck as a director, and I think that's just something that you just have to accept and embrace, and just know that it's going to be hard and there's a lot, but you can't sit there and go, this isn't fair, or this isn't my job, or this is not what a director does. Maybe when you get the opportunity to make Jurassic Park and stuff, you can do that. But right now and moving forward, like, I think you just need to understand that the importance of taking responsibility, which is going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot on your shoulders.
Yeah, and just building on that, I would say, like, get Movie Magic scheduling on your laptop, like, pay for it, own it, and be the one, like, volunteer to be the person who drives the grip truck back to the garage every night. I remember the first film I produced, I was so excited to finally have a PA drive the grip truck, and the first thing that happened is they ran into a tree because they were so tired. And that was a big cost. They were really I won't say their name, probably know them, but I've driven the grip truck on almost every project since then, because it's just like, you want to know every element of the production inside and out, honestly. Even if you're not proficient in I couldn't light a scene if you had a gun to my head, but I know, but I'm happy to take responsibility for all of that, those lights. So, yeah, had to get my license, right? I had to get that class, whatever. Still have it. Feels pretty good. Anyway.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here today. I know I learned a lot. Thank you all for tuning in. Join us on Monday for Jennifer King and Martha McGee to talk about scheduling. We'll see you guys then.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow, Alex.
See you tomorrow.
See you, Ling.
See ya.